This video is powered by As Always Entertainment. If you enjoyed this content, consider becoming a patron over on patreon.com/asalways for access to the Patreon exclusive podcast, The Kill Connor Clubhouse, early access to the Cinema Room podcast, being part of polls for future videos, and other early access material. With that said, please enjoy the video. When I was a kid, I used to play video games all the time. I used to play all of the new ones, I used to play the older ones just to enjoy them, just to have fun, just to connect with these worlds and characters and stories, and that created some kind of spark. A spark that became passion for video games and the video game industry. There have been plenty of franchises from the Sega Genesis to the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. I've had so many games that I've loved and had incredible experiences with, but that experience that I had as a kid in modern gaming is becoming harder and harder to find. Games that you can play just to have fun. Games that give you rich stories and characters that you can get heavily invested in, and gameplay that is satisfying and well made. It's becoming harder to just feel that kind of entertainment that comes specifically and only from video games. In recent years, from probably 2010 until now, we've had this increase of games trying to take more money from you, release copious amounts of DLC, bring out all these exclusive outfits and weapons and things that will help you in the game that you have to pay extra money for, season passes, gold editions, and even when they don't do these things, you're usually left with an experience that consists of completing repetitive objectives in an open world that has no need to be the size that it is. All of these things that are trying to squeeze more money from you, and even things that are taking advantage of gamers. We're used to it. We're so used to it at this point that when you get something like God of War, it really, really takes you back. One year ago, Sony Santa Monica released God of War, April 20th, 2018. Leading up to the release of this game, I'd never even played God of War. I was always an Xbox guy. I never really owned PlayStations other than the PlayStation 2, and back when I did, I honestly played more of the GameCube than I did my PlayStation 2, and so a lot of classic PS2 games passed me by, God of War being one of those franchises. You can even see my reaction to the 2016 E3 reveal of God of War. I didn't even so much as blink. I didn't yet have this connection to Kratos. I didn't even have a PS4 at that stage, so it wasn't even close to being on my radar. Fast forward to the start of 2018, and I had a PS4 Pro. I played Uncharted, The Last of Us, and all of the other Sony exclusives that people kept telling me to play. But the one I never had was God of War, and I felt it was high time that I gave it a shot. So I got the HD remasters for God of War 1 to 3, and myself and my brother George played them on our shared channel Horsey Fox, all the way through live so everybody could see our first time playing these games. You can check them out yourself, and I'll leave them linked below if you're interested. You can see if you watch these streams that as we kept going through these games, we got more and more invested in these characters and the journey of Kratos. Not only was he a badass who killed the entire Greek pantheon, but this was also an immensely personal journey. You can see, even though it wasn't maybe the core focus, the writer still cared about telling the story of Kratos and keeping this consistent across his entire trilogy. And I have to say, it was incredibly refreshing to play a game with that much consistency and richness to its writing. Playing through the original God of War games gave me a new perspective on what I've been missing. A franchise that delivers incredible gameplay that takes strategy and feels rewarding alongside a fantastic host of characters. A protagonist that has a duality to him which you can relate to but at the same time would be scared of, and all while telling his personal journey of loss, sacrifice, death, revenge, and redemption. God of War picks up this story after all is said and done, after Kratos has fled Greece, and after he's won. Stepping into the new God of War for the first time felt natural. Again, they managed to couple tone, gameplay, and story all into one package like they'd done before. Kratos had left Greece. He'd won, he'd grown old, and had to live with the consequences of his actions and what he'd become. This translates into gameplay. You couldn't have made this game and had it play just like the original games, it would have felt out of place. Changing up the gameplay and structure conveys and translates emotion and the protagonist's headspace and how that's changed. By changing the approach along with the direction of the narrative, everything fits together whilst also not diminishing what the originals did, and the respect I have for not only that approach, but its brilliant execution is infinite. I could sit and talk about every single aspect of this game again, but I already reviewed it in depth last year, so if you want to see my full review, go and check that out. I'll link it on a card. That's a proper structure review. This is more a video to look at some of the things that I personally remember and love. Moving on from the opening scene, there are a few feats that they accomplished whilst making this game. One of which is the seamless one camera shot for the entire game. Sure, there's trickery there, but it's not about whether they can or can't actually make it one camera shot, it's about whether it looks like it is and feels like it is, and it sure does. The amount of tension, emotion, and connection I felt all due to this one feature was incredible. You could have not included it, and I don't think it would have affected the storytelling. We all would have still praised it as an incredible game, but I think by doing it raises God of War above other games. It gives it a sense of care from the devs, whilst also in terms of narrative makes you feel closer to Kratos and his journey with Atreus, and this is something that I love. Talking of Atreus, I've always hated kid companion characters. I mean, who hasn't? It's like a common trope. But my god, was Atreus a great character. Not only does he have his own personality, but he has his own arc that directly mirrors that of Kratos' arc from the first 3 games, and also plays into Kratos' arc, whilst also being a major plot thread and device himself, and actually being useful in combat. They fully managed to make Atreus a brilliant character, and I can't wait to see more from him. And how can I make a video about God of War 1 year later without talking about the Leviathan axe? Not only was it satisfying to swing, the mechanic of being able to call it back like Thor's hammer Mjolnir was a great addition. Being able to string together light and heavy attacks with your special moves, and throwing and retrieving your axe made for some insanely cinematic looking moves, and it just gave you this brilliant sense of feeling like this Greek god. And not only did they invent another iconic weapon in the Leviathan axe, but they brought back a fan favourite too. And it wasn't just fan service. Although it definitely made me tear up, it was done in the most beautifully crafted way. It was a crossroads of Kratos' story, where his new life crossed with his old life and everything was coming together. I mean, rather than talking about it, let's just watch it.
There's nowhere you can hide, Spartan. Put as much distance between you and the truth as you want. It changes nothing. Pretend to be everything you are not. Teacher, husband, father. But there is one unavoidable truth you will never escape. You cannot change. You will always be a monster.
I know. But I am your monster no longer.
And after that heart-wrenching performance, after the nostalgia of seeing the blades and Athena again, you step out of the house, draw your blades, and use them to wipe out all of the incoming enemies. And for that instant, with the red light from the sky, with the rage from Kratos, with his old weapons, we see Kratos again, the old Kratos. And even though I wasn't a fan for as long as some people, that moment still touched me and gave me an overwhelming sense of joy that everything was tied together. Everything felt consistent and connected. This wasn't a reboot, but a sequel, but done in such a new, creative and inventive way. It was simply outstanding. There are so many key scenes I could ramble on about, but I'd just be retreading old ground. If you want to see my full thoughts on the entire game, totally in depth, myself and Tyler made a spoilercast podcast for God of War last year when it launched, where we go over everything story related, everything that we loved and what it means, our thoughts on sequels, all of it. So if you're looking for some in-depth God of War talk, I'll link that on a card too. To me, God of War is easily the game that defined this generation. Although Red Dead Redemption 2 is my all-time favourite game, that comes from its story. The story for Red Dead Redemption 2 is so special to me, and it's done so perfectly with characters that I loved since I was 14. To me, Red Dead Redemption 2 has to take my top spot, but that doesn't change the fact that I feel God of War easily deserved its Game of the Year, and it is to me the game of this generation. It tried something new with an old franchise and blew everything else out of the water. It told an engaging narrative, it gave us surprises, it gave us nostalgia, it gave us exciting and engaging gameplay. It gave us God of War. To everyone who worked on this game at Sony Santa Monica, thank you so much. It's teams like you who shape this industry more and more with the good that you do than the bad that other companies might do. We can have a million games with loot boxes and overpriced DLC, but so long as we have the potential of one game like God of War, I'll always play video games.